Well, first of all, he really doesn't have any strategy here. He understands nothing about economics. He doesn't even understand how tariffs work, and I think it's pretty clear by now that that's the case. And I would like to think that somebody who purports to be an economist would at least admit that much, because we have seen the backlash. We have seen that starting an unprovoked and unilateral trade war against some of our largest and most important trading partners has not worked out well for us or the global economy. Donald is a bully and he's a coward, which is why we have seen the backtracking, which is why we have seen, as you just pointed out, that China's strategy has actually worked for China, to China's benefit.
Mary Trump didn't just clap back. She launched a full-blown psychological missile at her uncle. Picture Trump's ego getting ripped off like a $5 toupee in a wind tunnel. This wasn't tea. This was a flamethrower. She didn't spill the kettle. She broke it, burned the table, and walked away with receipts. Trump's pride probably bunkered down with his tax returns. And this family drama makes your worst Thanksgiving look like a Hallmark movie.
You write in your new book, the trouble with Donald had started long before he entered school. At home, he tormented his little brother, Robert, a year and a half younger, and seemed to have nothing but disdain for everybody else, including, perhaps especially, his mother. The kids in the neighborhood alternately despised and feared him. He had a reputation for being a thin-skinned bully who beat up on younger kids, who ran home in a fit of rage as soon as somebody's kid. I mean, it's fascinating to hear that description of a little boy seeing the man.
That is one of the most damning and dangerous things about Donald Trump, and that is the thing that one of the things that makes him most unfit. He's never evolved from that. That's still.
Trump just got bodied by someone carrying his last name and half his DNA. Yep, Mary Trump is out here dragging her uncle like she's suing for emotional damages. If karma had a hype woman, it'd be Mary, waving her psychology degree in one hand and his indictment in the other like pom-poms of poetic justice.
Read. Mary Trump is the niece of President Donald Trump, a clinical psychologist, author of Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. She describes Donald Trump as a sociopath who grew up in a dysfunctional family that fostered his greed and cruelty, which he is now inflicting.
Let's be real. Trump's been roasted more than a gas station hot dog. But getting scorched by his niece? That's not just a roast. That's a backyard brawl with emotional fireworks. Trump showed up thinking he brought barbecue sauce, but it turned out to be jet fuel. And yeah, he got cooked.
Reasons he turned to his next oldest son, Donald, who had no skills, no requisite skills to be an entrepreneur or to expand the business the way my grandfather intended. However, he did have a bunch of defense mechanisms that he had used to protect himself from his, quite frankly, bleak early years on the planet, that my grandfather found very useful. Donald's bullying, his grandiose sense of him.
It's almost poetic. Trump crafted this Teflon image of being untouchable. Then Mary strolls in like a brainy hitwoman with a PhD and a psychological machete. She didn't come to butter bread. She came to slice egos. And trust. She's been sharpening that blade since childhood.
Because why should they? I think the best thing for the rest of the world to do, especially given the fact that Donald's ridiculous and ultimately dangerous tariffs are going potentially to create a global recession if we aren't careful. There is literally no reason to work with the United States right now, and we see China exploiting the vacuum that we've left, and we see other countries willing to stand their ground and get to the point where the United States becomes isolated economically.
You gotta love the irony. The man who called himself a genius just got intellectually vaporized by someone who actually teaches people how to diagnose narcissists. Mary didn't need to dig. Trump tweeted his symptoms daily in caps. And his meltdown? Less presidential. More toddler loss at Walmart.
While going straight at Donald's vulnerabilities, the narcissistic injury she inflicted on him in the first 10 or 15 minutes of the debate did exactly what it needed to do, which, as you just said, was make him unravel. He couldn't recover. And honestly, he's not.
This wasn't a tabloid hit job. Mary ran a forensic breakdown like it was CSI, Trump edition. She calmly deconstructed decades of ego, bluster, and bad decisions with clinical coolness. Meanwhile, Trump's typing fake news in all caps like it's going to summon a lawyer with a wand. Spoiler, it didn't.
You ever hear Donald Trump, your uncle, use the N-word?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
So, I know that sounds awful to put it that way, but when you live in a family, and you're a kid, it's not that I didn't know it was wrong. I did, because I lived a very different kind of experience growing up. I lived in Jamaica, Queens, which was...
Trump's defenders are short-circuiting. First, she's a liar, then a deep state puppet, then it's somehow Obama's fault. Mary? She's just calmly handing out psychological blueprints of her uncle's brain. While they scream conspiracy, she's reading peer-reviewed receipts.
Lower class, working class, and predominantly African American. I went to a school that was predominantly Jewish. So I didn't understand the animus, but it wasn't shocking because it's just the way it was. This is how adults in my orbit spoke and behaved. And now, of course, I learned a long time ago that it wasn't just. Now, of course, I learned a long time ago that it wasn't just something I disagreed with, but it was deeply wrong.
Trump can take hits from the media, comics, or rivals, but family, that stings. Mary didn't just air dirty laundry. She organized it, labeled it, and turned it into a PowerPoint. She didn't whisper secrets. She brought a megaphone and a spotlight. And the bus? He didn't get thrown under it. He gave her the keys.
I do, especially from 20 years ago, but even from 8 years ago. He has much less impulse control to the extent he ever had any. He is incapable of bringing a thought to conclusion. He goes off on tangents. And I think part of it is because he hasn't been pressed. He hasn't been challenged, and he's gotten away with so much. This is a man who spent his entire life pushing the envelope to see what he can get away with, and as soon as he realizes nobody's...
Mary's takedown wasn't just brutal. It was theatrical. Think stand-up comedy meets clinical dissection. Trump's rebuttal? A scrambled rant that sounded like it was typed between fast food bites. Meanwhile, Mary sat front row at the Chaos Circus for decades. Now she's giving backstage tours.
He's going to do anything in his power to make sure that doesn't happen. And we already see he's cheating already. By telling people that it isn't safe to vote by mail in the middle of a pandemic, by telling people that if Joe Biden wins, it will have been rigged. That's cheating. Because he's using the power of the Oval Office to get that message.
Trump's base did what they always do, shriek, meme, and blame Hillary. But Mary isn't some talking head. She's got credentials, emotional battle scars, and the deadpan delivery of someone who survived group texts with narcissists. She didn't just scream. She mapped out the chaos and handed the world a survival manual.
Mary always knew
that his father was born in Germany. Can you understand why?
It's really fascinating what Donald gets wrong sometimes. It's difficult on occasion to know if he's doing it on purpose or not. So that confuses me. He used to say that he was Swedish. When asked what his ethnicity was, he would say Swedish because, the excuse given was that they worked with a lot of Jewish people and they didn't want to offend them he didn't want to offend them by admitting to his German.
This is what happens when the family's so-called black sheep turns out to be the only one with night vision. Mary saw through the gold-plated illusion while the rest clung to fantasy. Trump tried to erase her with denials, but you can't delete someone who sat at your dinner table while you yelled at cranberry sauce.
Essentially absent for almost a year. She had suffered very severe postpartum issues after my Uncle Robert was born that had gone undetected for so long that they were life-threatening. And that was the first major experience that shaped Donald. He experienced her absence as an abandonment. And my grandfather, who was a straight up sociopath, was incapable and unwilling to fulfill the caregiver role. So Donald was very lonely and very frightened at an extremely crucial developmental period. So, he was never able to make up the...
Mary isn't chasing fame. She's chasing truth. Not Trump's version of truth, spelled with capital letters and drama, but the real stuff: data, evidence, observation. And for Trump, that's kryptonite. She's not lying. She's confirming what we all suspected, with a clinical report attached.
I hope that more media outlets allow us to hear what Donald's actually saying instead of taking it upon themselves to quote-unquote translate him. His nonsense is untranslatable. So what ends up happening, because human beings need to make meaning of things, is that certain reporters and journalists end up imbuing Donald's meaningless statements with meaning, so they don't seem as dangerous and, quite frankly, unhinged as
Trump tried to spin it, calling her bitter, crazy, irrelevant. Classic projection. Every insult bounced back harder than his checks. Mary's not guessing. She's witnessed a dysfunction from inside the gilded cage. She's not throwing shade. She's writing a diagnostic manual and offering free tours.
Military Academy for high school. Explain why he went there.
In, I guess it would have been, middle school, I guess, his behavior started to become increasingly belligerent and uncontrollable. So, and it wasn't just at home, it was at school as well. He went to a small school in Forest Hills, which is actually the same school I attended when I was a kid. And my grandfather was on the board of trustees at that school. So I think on the one hand, my grandfather found it annoying that his son was creating problems in a school that he was associated.
In the end, this isn't just family betrayal. It's poetic collapse. Trump spent decades building a brand on loyalty and power. Mary didn't need a megaphone, just the truth and a backbone. And when she stood up and said, "Enough," the empire cracked on the inside. For Trump, that's the ultimate betrayal, and the one punch he never saw coming.